Imagine yourself at the dawn of a feudal kingdom, where the mists still hang over the fields, and the song of geese echoes between the stone walls. Against this backdrop, a young aristocrat lifts his face, his chest full of courage and awe. He is about to cross a sacred threshold, to become a knight. In the European feudal era, dominated by ties of vassalage, tournaments, honor, and swords, the rite of passage for the knight was one of the ceremonies most charged with symbolism, tradition, and human drama. And behind the gleaming helmets and embroidered cloaks, there were profound rituals, gestures that spoke to the soul, purification, oath, trial, and consecration. In this itinerary, I invite you to walk with me through this process, from the girl buried in the castle to the top of the saddle, from the ritual bathwater to the famous blow of the espada on the shoulder, and to discover little-talked-about curiosities, almost hidden facets of this world that shape not only warriors but philosophers of honor. May God, the only Lord and our Savior Jesus Christ, be honored in everything, for every step in this narrative is for Him and through Him. The birth of a warrior. At the dawn of the lives of many knights, their destiny was already set. Born into noble families or well-placed vassals, boys were prepared from an early age for honor. At about the age of 7, the future knight was sent to the court or castle of a larger lord, not simply to play, but to serve as a shaman. There he would learn etiquette, posture, dress management, horse care, the reputation of the home, and the surname. This period of service for another master was not a mere internship. It was an apprenticeship of nobility, of hierarchy, of duty. The boy saw that in feudal society, it was not enough to have blue blood. Action, discipline, sacrifice were necessary. Curiosity, Little commented. In some cases, the shaman served in the chapel of the castle, listening to the prayers of the clergy, which introduced him from an early age to the Christian mystery of spiritual armor. There are indications that the use of the horse and the instruction of the lancer began earlier than many imagine. A boy shaman could already fight in bidding games or lead the horse in mock battles. Financial inheritance mattered. Without resources for armor horse training equipment, the boy would hardly be promoted. Sites up.edu+1. This first stage was the cultivation of the seed. The young man absorbed not only the technique, but the ideal to protect the defenseless, to honor the master, to serve Christ through the sword. For in the silence of the corridors it was repeated, not only the strength of the blade, but the strength of the heart, the squire, and the trials of humility. Around the age of 19 or 20, or sometimes before or after, depending on the context, the shaman became a squire. This was the second phase, more than serving. He accompanied the knight, took care of the armor, kept the horse, participated in training, learned the code of chivalry. The squire could also accompany the lord in tournaments or military campaigns, see the blood, hear the clang of steel, feel the fear and glory. It was an immersion in the real, no longer just the safe castle, but the uncertain field, the dust, the risk. Thought-provoking curiosities. Before the final investiture ceremony, the squire often spent a night of vigil in the chapel, praying, meditating, often fasting, a moment of spiritual purification. There are testimonies that the ritual bath the day before, we will see in the next chapter, was associated with the symbolic abandonment of childhood and with being reborn as a defender of the good. In some lands, the test of valor emerged. Not necessarily a great duel, but a tournament between squires or demonstrating fidelity and service in campaign. Those who stood out could skip stages. At this stage, the squire faced both the master's discipline and his own inner demons, insecurity, vanity, fear of failure. It was a test of character. And it is here that we can see the profound beauty of the feudal system. Not just the sword wielded, but the tempered heart. The young man entered the forge of honor, the eve of the rite, the bath, the white robe and the vigil. The most symbol-laden moment has arrived, the eve of the investiture. The squire who was to be promoted gave clear instructions to abandon the armor, to wash, to put on a tunic or white clothes, to sleep in a new bed, all signs of rebirth. The bath symbolized purification, both of body and soul. On the eve of the investiture, the knight took a ritual bath so that the sins of his life until then were symbolically washed away. After the bath, the candidate slept on clean linen, as if he emerged no longer as a boy or squire, but as a servant warrior. Soon after, a vigil followed, often in the chapel, with a lighted candle, prayer, meditation on the death and resurrection in Christ. For the knight was called to give life to others and, if necessary, to give his own. Curious elements. The white tunic, symbolic garment of purity, of passage, of the new man. The vigil could last all night. The silence of the church in the middle of the castle contrasted with the clang that was to come the next day. Some sources mention that the candidate fasted until dawn in humility and waiting. In certain regions, the squire exchanged a confession or formal renunciation of sins before going to sleep. Medieval, yes, but human, vulnerable, intimate. On this threshold between yesterday and tomorrow, the young man lived a moment of clarity and fear, of surrender and promise. He was separated from the ordinary. He entered the sacred. The big day, oath, investiture, and the crossing of the blade. The dawn of the great day shone over the castle courtyard or in the church. It was the moment when the squire became a knight, or at least received the title, the dignity, the weight, and the responsibilities that they could never relinquish. The oath, standing before you, the clergy and the witnesses, the candidate swore an oath to protect the weak, to be loyal to you, to defend the church, to act with mercy, honor, and courage. That was the moral contract, as important as the sword he would soon wield. The endowment and the tip of the blade. After the oath, the physical act followed. The lord or king shouted the name of the suitor, and usually with a sword drawn gave the symbolic blow, sometimes 2 taps on the shoulder or only on the left shoulder, the gesture that transformed the man into a knight. This was the moment of the accolade. The young man would kneel, the lord would lift him up and say, "Arise, my knight," or something equivalent. And in a second, life changed. Symbols and accessories. The spurs. The lord fixed the spurs to the new knight, a symbol that he now served on the steed. The sword. It was often blessed or touched by a priest, because combat was seen not only as a land fight, but as a service to God and the community. The shield and the coat of arms. The young man received the colors, the arms of his house, or designated his own symbol, a mark of identity and honor. The feast. After the ceremony, there was a banquet, music, celebration, because the social communion celebrated the new order. Less publicized facts. In some cases, lord or king imposed on the new knight an inaugural mission. Go guard the coast, protect this village, not only for honor, but to test him. There are reports of knights who, at the time of investiture, received symbolic gifts, a pair of white gloves, purity, a new helmet, or even a cloak of a different color. The custom of the double blow, a blow to the right shoulder, another to the left, varied according to the land, the century, and the local custom. When the young man stood up, the white tunic had given way to the rich cloak, the helmet, the sword, but also to a new weight, that of responsibility, of duty, of sacrifice. Life after the title, duties, tournaments, and chivalry morale. Being a knight was not just about carrying a sword and riding, it was fulfilling a series of duties in the feudal system, serving the lord militarily, guarding castles, carrying escorts, participating in wars or campaigns, and staying true to the code of chivalry. Encyclopedia Britannica, Maung. The knight was also a vassal, part of a web of obligations. fidelity, help, advice. Wikipedia, the tournament, the stage of glory and constant competition. The tournaments, whether jousting with the spear, sword combat, or melee, were as much a social spectacle as a test of dexterity and courage. Victory brought prestige, but defeat could mean shame or injury. Within this environment, the knight showed himself worthy of the oaths taken. The code of chivalry: honor, courtesy, protection of the weak, generosity, respect for women, fidelity to the master. They were virtues exalted in novels, but put into practice, not always fulfilled, it is true, but valued as ideals. This code functioned as a moral goal. The knight should not only win, but behave with nobility. Little-known curiosities: some knights had spiritual patrons, or saints to whom they dedicated their weapons or helmets. For example, Saint George. In certain kingdoms, if a knight broke his oath to the Lord or the Church, he could lose fief, land, or be deposed. Despite the romantic idealization, many knights were also landlords, acting as administrators, local judges, or even exploring villages, which put tension between ideal and reality. The transformation from squire to knight was the beginning of a new journey. Not always easy, often violent, but full of meaning. And every time a knight mounted his steed, adjusted his helmet, or helped a lord, he remembered. That ritual, that night of vigil, that oath were not in vain. Mysteries, regional variations, and historical curiosities. When we look closely, we realize that the knightly ritual was not identical everywhere. There were variations according to time, place, and religious influence. Variations and adaptations. In France and England in the 12th century, for example, the custom of bathing and wearing white robes was more common among wealthier families, among nobles on the rise, or with strong clerical connections. In other places, the rite could be simplified: a sword strike only, without prolonged vigil or formal bath. In war or emergency situations, a squire could be knighted by the field, without all the usual pomp, if he demonstrated bravery or saved the Lord. Curiosities little talked about. In some castles, the new knight was taken on horseback to the gate of the village or fief, so that the people could see him assume his new position, as a public act of social commitment. The blow of the sword on the shoulder symbolically referred to the power or regret of the knight's personal crusade. He accepted the weight of the weapons, of protection, of the cause. There are records of literal dark knights at the end of the Middle Ages who mixed the chivalric ideal with mercenary groups, showing the tension between the ideal ritual and practical corruptions. Relationship with the Christian faith. We must not forget that in the feudal mentality, the knight was seen as a servant of God as well, a belt of truth, a shield of justice. The ritual of purification, the vigil, the blessing of the sword point to this. The symbolism of the washing away of sins, the white tunic, the light of the candle, everything referred to the grace of Christ. Thus, when the young man became a knight, he was not only a military figure, but a moral defender, a guardian of order and faith under the one Lord. The legacy: why does it still fascinate us? Today, whether we watch chivalric films, read medieval romances, or create narratives for digital content, the rite of the knight evokes something powerful. The transcendence of the ordinary to the extraordinary, the commitment to something greater than oneself, the beauty of a values-driven life. For you who produce content, and I know you seek to touch hearts and minds deeply, this theme is very rich: the young shaman, the ritual bath, the vigil in the castle, the sword blow, the oath. They are strong images, visual palettes that evoke suspense, transformation, soul. We can almost hear the echo of the swords, the beating of the hooves, the silence of the chapel, the beating of the heart. Applications to your digital content. Visual. Portray the eve, in which the candidate walks among torches, utteration, the tense countenance. Excellent for video storytelling. Hearing. The sound of the bath, running water, the sigh when wearing a white tunic, the silence of the vigil, the sound of the sword touching the shoulder, strong sensory triggers. Emotional. Explore fear and expectation before the investiture, the before and after becoming a knight, the duality between honor and temptation. Intellectual. To address regional variations, the reason for so many symbologies, bath, white tunic, vigil, the connection between faith and military service in feudalism. Because it enchants, because there is in us, in the spectators, in the students, in the followers, a desire for right, for passage, for purpose. Seeing the ordinary rise to the extraordinary is inspiring. And in the drama of the night, we find universal metaphors: the call, the trial, the consecration, the mission. Epilogue. The sword that rises to the one Lord. At the end of this crossing, we can see the ritual of becoming a knight not only as a historical curiosity, but as a symbol for our times. To rise, to serve, to purify one's heart, to take an oath of honor, and to wield the sword of truth. And in all this, we remember that truly there is no other God besides him, the Lord of hosts, the Lord of kings, the one through whom all true service, all royal honor, all righteous battle has meaning. Our content, our narratives, our lives, all must be through him and for him. May this script inspire, may this story excite, may this ancient past remind us of our present calling, to be knights in spirit, in culture, in work, in life, defending the good, serving the other, standing in the light. Arise, knight. The journey begins now.